Okay.
Okay.
We've got all of 2 minutes.
Try jumping in and out first to save you time in case.
Good afternoon, Peter. Good afternoon. Welcome.
Thank you. I guess good to see everyone.
Well, shall we, the Buddhist speaker, good afternoon. Our first speaker is Ahmadiyya Muslim, but I don't see at the moment actually. So it could be that you could end up starting the speeches, okay?
Good to know.
But let's hope, okay? And Father Jeff, you're going to start recording soon, yeah? Just as a backup?
Yeah, we're now recording, and it is also live on YouTube.
Thank you. It's 3:01, so if we could stop the music, please, then we could.
Ask who's playing the music because it's coming through to everyone.
It is coming from Manny?
Yeah.
Okay, that's gone. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we shall make a start. Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome to the start of Watford Celebration 2021. Today we have Sacred Space, which is online, which makes it comfortable and easy for everybody to join from wherever you are. Very warm welcome to all of you to join our Sacred Space discussion. And tomorrow, for the first time in the history of Watford Celebration, we will be doing live from bandstand in Kesugari Park. That is a first for us as well. So with the weather like this, and hope it continues so we can at least have a wonderful celebration at the bandstand tomorrow, and hope to see all of you and lot more to enjoy the Watford celebration, the cultural aspects, presentations from the bandstand. My name is, if you don't know, Yogesh Joshi, and I'm the facilitator for Sacred Space. Before we go into speeches and discussion, I hope, obviously, with the 18 months or so, we had time to actually practice Zoom sessions. Everybody is familiar, but I'll just do a quick reminder that we should have just actually follow some ground rules to respect each other and wait for everybody's turn to be called up. And apart from the speakers who will be called up in a alphabetical order to give their speech, and then there'll be comments and questions sort of afterwards. Anybody else, if you have a comment or a question to ask, if you could use the reaction button and raise your hand, that would make it a lot easy to pick up and then call on you. Or you can at least put, I'm not sure the chat function is working, but if it's working, then you can obviously put a comment or a question in the chat as well, and then you can call up that way. And I hope everybody behaves, so I don't have to become Jackie Weaver of the Hornsworth Parish fame. So let's hope we will actually have a very nice, smooth session. The way the society, coming back to today's discussion and the topic, the way the society has evolved over the last decade or two, and especially in the recent times of COVID pandemic, in these challenging times, it can be difficult to respect and accept others when they hold views that are different to us. And this is one of the main reasons that Watford Interfaith Association Committee decided to, after discussion at least, to have a topic, today's discussion for a topic, which is, are we becoming a more intolerant society? And if so, what can our faith communities do about it? So without any further delay, I will start calling speakers who will actually give their speeches. And if there are no immediate comments or questions, we will actually listen to all 10 speakers we have. And then we will open up the floor for comments, questions, and discussion. So our first speaker is in alphabetical order from Ahmadiyya Muslim community, Shehzab Atta. Can I invite Shehzab? Do you briefly see Shehzab? Okay, no, I thought I saw, maybe I saw somebody else, but okay, so if that is the case, we will obviously wait for Shehzab to join us. But our next speaker is Paul Shelby, representing Buddhist. So warm welcome to Paul, over to you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to speak to our topic today from the Buddhist perspective. Yeah, most Western Buddhists tend to use their birth name rather than their Buddhist one. So yeah, mine's Paul, but my Buddhist name is Nana Dipo. And despite the hair or lack of it, I'm a lay Buddhist and not a monk. So the question, first question, are we becoming a more intolerant society? And in some areas, I think yes, there are more things to be anxious about at the moment. And so we try to protect ourselves. Unfortunately, we often do this in unhelpful ways. We try to make ourselves stronger by shoring up our beliefs, binding together more strongly to those who share our beliefs, and trying to weaken those who don't share our beliefs, perhaps possibly through hostile or aggressive speech and behavior. So we become more intolerant, and unless we have help from a higher spiritual view, our intolerance binds us to ongoing cycles of greed and of hatred and delusion, the three fires or the three poisons that we speak of in Buddhism at the heart of our minds. So fundamental to Buddhism is an understanding that we are interdependent rather than separate beings. The Buddhist path begins with what we call right view or skillful understanding, having beliefs that are in accord with the nature of reality. So following right view and right understanding, the next three steps of the Buddha's Eightfold Path speak of how our understanding determines our intentions, which determine our speech, which determine our behavior, and so on. If we start with unskillful beliefs, then our intentions, speech, and actions will also be unskillful. Conversely, skillful beliefs aligned with the nature of reality lead to compassion, love, and happiness. So a quote from a famous Buddhist scripture, the Dhammapada, the start of that scripture, expresses this very simply. And the quote is, all experience is preceded by mind, led by mind, made by mind. Speak or act with a corrupted mind and suffering follows, as the wagon wheel follows the hoof of the ox. All experience is preceded by mind, led by mind, made by mind. Speak or act with a peaceful mind, and happiness follows like a never departing shadow. So the Buddhist path asks us to examine our mind, our understandings, to see if we are speaking and acting from a separated or segregated place, leading to suffering for us all, or whether we can align ourselves with an understanding of interdependence and act from that place. Buddhism also asks us to perfect 10 aspects of our character. I'm not going to go through all of those, don't have time, but the relevant one here being the development of tolerance or patience. Our faith communities need to model tolerance with others having different views from us, and this is what we do in WIFA. But like our bodies, our minds and beliefs all develop at different rates. And in this age of increasing threat and anxiety, we may find ourselves drawn to becoming more rigid in our beliefs and practices. Buddhism would tell us to hold all things lightly. And in doing this, we can model the flexibility of mind needed to get through difficult times. The Buddhist scriptures have many extreme stories of people being cut with knives or even sawn apart. And the Buddha says that we would not be a follower of his teachings if we were to react with anger. A big ask. We can all, however, start with recognizing the small things of which we feel intolerant and letting them go, and knowing that we're supported by our faiths in doing so. We are not alone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for enlightening us for some Buddhist teachings in the context of today's topic. Thank you. Our next speaker is from Christian Science, Jenny Pearson. Warm welcome to Jenny, and over to you.
Thank you, Yogesh.
Thank you.
And good to speak to you all. What can Christian Science offer to encourage a more tolerant society? The founder of this denomination, Mary Baker Eddy, was keenly aware of factors leading to divisions and intolerance and encouraged her followers to address them. She wrote in her book, Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures, Christian Science preeminently promotes affection and virtue in families and therefore in the community. Her modest starting point suggests that good individual behavior spreads outwards. When combined with the courage of conviction, it can be more powerful than we might imagine. For its followers, Christian Science encourages consistent daily prayer and a religious practice founded on Christian values, in particular, the golden rule of selfless care for others, which characterized everything Jesus Christ did. Not only Christians would agree that Jesus' mission was to bring peace and harmony to earth. Is there evidence that Christian virtue and the practice of good have power today in this world? Let's take, for example, the Christian Science Monitor, a secular international newspaper published by the Christian Science Church and founded by Eddy over 100 years ago, with the express purpose to injure no man, but to bless all mankind. It continues today to uncover stories that bring out the power of virtue and good practice. One recent report tells of a Belarus human rights promoter. In spite of the long, harsh conditions of her incarceration, at a court appearance, she smiled and danced, expressing her joy that human freedom is a universal right. She believed that facing down injustice with surprising cheerfulness had real power to change attitudes. Her campaign, along with others, has a large and influential following. That article is just one of many in the Monitor that illustrate individual behavior impacting for good. The Monitor reporter's shared aim is to give news that uplifts and inspires and empowers. It is a resource Christian scientists and others can use in their prayers for the world. It gives glimpses of hope, tolerance, and mutual understanding, which point to the individual furtherance of universal good. In Christian Science, as with so many faith traditions, this universal good is God. And to the degree we stick to what Christ Jesus called the two great commandments, to love God and our neighbour as ourselves, we are living lives to promote better respect and tolerance for all. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Jenny Pearson from Christian Science. I see our Ahmadiyya Muslim speaker has joined us, so I'll actually go back to our original running order, and I'd like to invite Shahzeb Attar to enlighten us actually on today's topic from the Ahmadiyya Muslim point of view. Over to you.
Thank you much, Yogesh. In the name of Allah, the gracious, the ever merciful, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon you. Thank you so much, Judith, for the invitation. And the topic of discussion, I understand, is, are we becoming a more intolerant society? And if so, what can the faith community do about it? By the sheer grace of Allah the Almighty, we as Ahmadi Muslims are commanded and led by one spiritual being in Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, the current caliph of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. And we always echo and listen to his divine words and try to implement everything and anything he states. And you'll find across the spectrum, wherever Ahmadis reside, whether it's in the West or in the East, or indeed in the South, you'll find Ahmadis united together in the sort of goal to promote harmony and peace, the two cornerstones of Islam. And similarly, in respect to what I'm saying, His Holiness, on one occasion, delivered a speech whereby he addressed the subject matter of today's meeting. And he states, we as Ahmadi Muslims firmly believe that religion is a personal matter for every individual. It is a matter of the heart, and no one has the right to speak ill of the beliefs of other people. No one should mock what others consider sacred, because treating other people with derision and contempt can only lead to pain and suffering and create division. Conversely, tolerance and mutual respect are the cornerstones through which we can build a peaceful and harmonious society. In today's world, critics are quick to blame religion, and particularly Islam, for the problems of the world. Yet many people who are suffering from inner torment and unrest are those who live a purely secular existence. And so their problems cannot be blamed on Islam or, in fact, any other religion. As a religious leader, His Holiness states, as a religious leader, I firmly believe that instead of being the cause of today's problems, religion is the answer. And from an Islamic perspective, the solution is quite simple. The Prophet of Islam, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, taught that the true peace of mind requires for a person to recognize God the Almighty, and thus to develop a connection with him. Because according to Islam, one of the attributes of God the Almighty is that he is the source of peace. He desires for his creation to live peacefully, irrespective of any differences of religion or belief. Furthermore, the Holy Prophet Muhammad, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, taught that Allah the Almighty is the provider and the sustainer of all creation. I believe that this simple and profound point, if acted upon, not just by Muslims, but by all people, is the means for everlasting peace in society. No doubt everyone desires peace for themselves and their loved ones, but most people would be lying if they claim that they want their opponents and competitors to have peace and to live with contentment. Yet this is the standard of nobility and generosity of the spirit of Islam. It is a religion and teaching that promotes selflessness and urges humans to discard all traces and selflessness. The principle given by the Holy Prophet of Islam is that a person should be open-hearted and pure of mind. Instead of desiring only the best for themselves, a person should desire the same for others as well. And sadly, in today's world, we tend to see the opposite. Modern society is consumed by self-interest and greed. Disorder, conflict, and warfare are on the rise, and the principles of equity and justice are being constantly discarded. This is illustrated by the foreign policies of many powerful and rich countries. It has been a constant theme of modern history that dominant powers have sent their armies to distant lands on the pretext of establishing peace. But this has proven that their real objective has been to protect and enhance their vested interests. And in terms of religion, the Holy Prophet of Islam, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, taught that developing true peace requires for mankind to turn towards God the Almighty, who is the source of peace, the noble and the pure, and try to emulate his attributes. And this means that human beings should set aside their personal interests in the pursuit of peace and ensure that their motivations are pure at all times. Now, the patience of the Muslims was based on the command of Allah the Almighty, which is mentioned in chapter 25, verse 64 of the Holy Quran. And addressing the Muslims in this verse, God said, "And the servants of the gracious God are those who walk on the earth in a dignified manner, and when the ignorant address them, they say peace." It is the need of the time that we all join together, and instead of warring or waging against one another's religious sentiments, we join forces and work together, building a better future for our children and future generations. Let us set aside our differences and work faithfully towards developing true and sustainable peace in the world. Let us respect one another and strive to build a better society founded upon principles of unity and the common good. May Allah the Almighty enable us to do so. Amen. So that was the speech delivered by His Holiness, the fifth Caliph of the Ahmadi Muslim community. And it's through his teachings and his words do we, as followers of the religion of Islam, abide by and try and emulate his very words.
Thank you very much, Shahjeb, bringing the Ahmadiyya Muslim point of view, at least for today's discussion. Our next speaker is a Christian speaker from Church of England, the main religion of this country. I go to Reverend Tony Rindell. Thank you.
So thank you for that introduction of the main religion in this country. So that seems to put a little bit of added pressure onto what I might have to say. My name is Tony Rindell, and indeed I am a vicar of St Mary's, Watford, Church of England, the town centre church, and probably the oldest place of worship in our town. So I feel very honoured and privileged to be the vicar of St Mary's, and indeed honoured and privileged to be with you today. And because I saw the running order, I thought I was going to be following Jenny, and I pride myself to say that there was much of what Jenny said that I agreed with, as you might expect, with the close association with the Christian Scientist and the mainstream Christian position. But actually, I found myself thinking that there was much that I agreed with Shahzeb as well. And that's what really excites me this day, that there is so much that I think we will find that we're in agreement. So there was much I could have said to echo what Jenny said about prayer, and particularly, I think, the golden rule of do unto others as you would have do to yourself, and the two great commandments, to love God and to love our neighbour. And I think trying to put some theological building blocks onto that, I think I would want to start from that very fundamental principle that all human beings are fearfully and wonderfully made by God and are made in the image of God. And therefore, regardless of creed or ethnic background or any other thing that we might see as different, we have our shared humanity. And that because we're made in the image of God, that there is an innate goodness within each one of us to be recognized, to be explored and engaged, and to come together because we were made fearfully and wonderfully by God to share in his creation. And fundamentally, we were created to be relational human beings. Being made in the image of God is probably not an easy thing to grasp at one level. And therefore, I would want to look at the person of Jesus Christ, who St. Paul described as the visible image of the invisible God. Jesus, through Jesus, God meets us in our humanity. In other words, we understand that Jesus became human so that we might be able to meet with God and share in his divinity. So from a Christological point of view, we understand Jesus as being fully human and fully divine. And that's something that's not always easy to grasp. It's not saying that sometimes it's human, sometimes it's divine, but it is always human and is always divine in nature. And therefore, when we want to understand what it means for us to be made in the image of God, we have to look at the person of Jesus Christ to see that very nature and that very essence of God, who is love. And therefore, when we talk about the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ, we see how God has declared his love and established his kingdom. And that's a kingdom that's made of justice, of peace, and above all else, love. And God calls us as Christians, calls us, I think, as all human beings, to establish his kingdom, this kingdom of justice and peace. And so when it comes to tolerance, yes, there is a whole thing about grace, mercy, regard, respect. And I think going back to what Jenny was saying, that comes through prayer that changes our hearts, changes our understanding so that we grow in our love and tolerance for one another. But we're intolerant to those matters of injustice and things that are wrong. And it's important that we speak out about those things that are wrong in order that we can establish peace, that we can establish fresh understanding, that we can understand and embrace a more harmonious, more caring, loving society. So therefore, I think the Christian faith has always tried to be at the heart of the community. That's why St. Mary's is there at the centre of our town. Most churches do play a prominent part in the community where they're located, but also in their activity. And because we understand that everyone is made in the image of God, I think it's important that we try to establish good relationships with everybody so that we are co-workers in building and transforming our communities so that they more and more reflect the values of the kingdom in terms of justice, in terms of peace, in terms of love, so that the fulfillment of that basic law of loving God and loving neighbour can be fulfilled. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Reverend Tony Rindle. Our next speaker is Sister Anne Starzakar. She's from Brahma Kumaris, but we don't have a Hindu speaker either, at least, so she's the sort of closest we can relate to in terms of representing aspects of Hinduism as well. But she'll mainly speak from the Brahma Kumaris point of view. So over to Sister
Can
Anne.
I? Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction. I must say that within the Brahma Kumaris, we have people who come from all religions in the world. It isn't just Hindu. People come from every religion, Christian, Buddhist, Sikhism, Jewish, and we are one family seeking peace. So every human being, whether they are aware of it or not, is seeking peace, love, happiness, and truth. But they've erred into intolerance out of selfishness, anger, competition, greed, often leading to violence, conflict, and war. God, by whatever name you call him, is the source of peace, love, happiness, and truth. He constantly offers us these spiritual gifts through prayer and meditation. So let us then have the faith to use them and become an example for others. We can only change ourselves, not anyone else. By creating peace and harmony within ourselves and our faith community, the vibrations of peace and harmony spread out into the world around us and far away. It is so easy to point a finger at others, but what about me and my behavior? How patient am I? How tolerant am I? Can I have respect, regard for other people and other communities? Certainly, the work of interfaith has come a long way to healing the divisions between religions. We don't have to agree, but we do accept and have respect for each other's differences. Tolerance is about going beyond external appearances, behavior, and beliefs. Whatever the faith or no faith, each one is a child of God made in his image of love, peace, and truth. But being caught up in the materialism of the world, human beings have forgotten this, and we need to revive it, come back to our true nature, the true nature of all human beings: peace, love, truth. So let faith communities be an example to the world of love, peace, and harmony, and allow the transformation to happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sister Anne Strzaker. I'm glad at least of the 10 speakers we have today, 9 are from different faiths and religions, but we have one next, Alexander Williams, who doesn't represent any religion or a faith, as he is a humanist. So over to Alexander to bring a different point of view for today's topic of discussion.
Thank you very much for that introduction. It's really wonderful to hear these different points of view, and despite being from a non-faith perspective, I agree with a lot of what you've had to say. I think from a humanist point of view, there are really 4 strands which have something to contribute to this discussion of whether we're becoming a more intolerant society. I actually have quite an optimistic point of view. I think we're becoming more tolerant in lots of ways. And when I think about the progress over the past few decades on things like disability rights, abortion, rights for lesbian, gay, bisexual and trans people, discrimination being written into law as a hate crime, so making a society or encouraging society to be more tolerant of racial difference, even things like legislation around blasphemy and ageism. I think we really are pushing towards a more tolerant society. But that isn't to say there is not intolerance. And I think where we find intolerance, it really needs to be challenged and confronted. And as I say, I think there are 4 strands of humanism which help us think about how to do that. The first is our focus on science and evidence as a way of understanding the world and the universe in which we live. And I think that focus on science and evidence can help us dispel a lot of alternative facts or fake news, which have become the buzzwords of previous years, which often lead people to points of view which are intolerant of others. I think the second is atheism or agnosticism, which places a responsibility on each individual to live their best life in the here and now, rather than waiting for an afterlife in which they might be able, or indeed reincarnation, in which they might be able to correct some of the problems and difficulties of this world. The third is secularism. And I'm a passionate believer that everybody should have the right to exercise their own beliefs in freedom and without hindrance. And as humanists, we strongly support a secularist society in which no particular group, religious or non-religious, has privilege or indeed structured disadvantage against another. And the fourth, perhaps the most important, would be kindness and compassion, doing our best to make moral decisions based on what we think is most kind and most compassionate, not just for other human beings, but for all life and wildlife. And particularly in this time of environmental awareness, thinking about how we preserve this planet and its eco-health. So there is a clear problem, and there is intolerance. And I think a lot of it is built around the technology that we use. A lot of social media in particular deliberately builds divisiveness and polarizes people against each other. And it can be increasingly difficult for people who have opposing beliefs to come together in kindness to listen to those opposing beliefs rather than shout at one another. And that's why it's so wonderful to have a forum like this where people who know they have differing beliefs come together with civility, with respect for each other, both to hear what those differences are and to find the common ground. And we need more moral actors, ethicists perhaps, to take an active role in the digital space to make sure that spaces like this become the norm rather than shouting matches with offensive language, with anger and with deliberate dispute, which might encourage clicks and engagement, but certainly does nothing to build tolerance. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexander. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Reinhold Rosenberg, who represents Judaism. He's a Jew. And if I may say so, he's also a chairman of Hertfordshire Interfaith Forum. So not only he obviously does a lot for his faith, religion, the Judaism, but also a lot of work actually county-wide through the Hertfordshire Interfaith Forum. So over to Reinhold.
Thank you, Georges. You took away my introduction speech, which was to declare these things before I actually started, so you know where I'm coming from.
Okay.
It's all right. Intolerance. I assume in this instance we are talking about racial and ethnic intolerance rather than individual intolerance. And in that case, I would say yes, it has increased. What you've got to remember is intolerance, the way we're talking about it, presupposes an act of putting people into little boxes. So all Jews, all the same, all Muslims, all of them are the same, all blacks, all exactly the same. Everything they do is the same, not individually, but as a group. And that's where the intolerance comes from. It generates an us and them society. We are safe, but they are a threat. And so it goes on. But in fact, tolerance, as people have already said, people are all individuals. We are all made in the image of God, but we are all individuals, and therefore we're all different. Some of us are good, some of us are okay, some of us are bad, and it's like a scale. There is a scale of which includes intolerance, and it starts with hate. And as you come up from hate, you're going to intolerance, and then come up further, and now you're into tolerance. But now you go further, and you get like, and you go even further, and you come across a word that has been mentioned many times in this session, love. That is where we should aim for. Tolerance, in fact, is not good enough. You can tolerate pain, you can tolerate discomfort, you can tolerate yogesh, but that is not enough. What we're looking for is actually beyond tolerance. We're looking for like and love. So I now have to declare that I'm going into the Jewish problem. There are many people that fall into the boxes of us, of them. The Jews are just one. Muslims quite often, LGBT, BAME, all these people might be subject to persecution. But I'm going to concentrate, because I'm Jewish, on the problem of anti-Semitism and the reason why I say intolerance has gone up. I want you to think about this. Jews are about 1/4% of the world. 1/4%. We have a history of persecution going back at least to the 10th century. We're an ancient, about 3,500-year-old faith, and we have one very small democratic state, which we regained after 2,000 years in exile. So you wonder why people like the UN single them out above all nations, to be at fault all the time. All the Jews are all at fault. It's a function of putting people in boxes. And the UN are not the only ones. White supremacists will all do it. And I have to say, extreme Islam will do it for all sorts of reasons, but they do it. Some numbers that I researched for anti-Semitism, in the EEC, there is a 7 times increase in anti-Semitic actions in France, and 13 times, this is in the last year or two, in Germany. It's a fact that after the USA and Germany, the UK has the next highest anti-Semitic attacks in 2020. 89% of Jews say yes, anti-Semitism has increased. 28% have actually experienced it themselves. I am not in that 28%, so I'm fortunate from that point of view. And there are numerous instances of violence in broad daylight, attacks on synagogues. It's all there. I got to thinking why God actually chose the Jews in the first place. And I believe that it is to give the nations of the world the opportunity to show tolerance, at least tolerance. It is to celebrate diversity. It is to show the dignity of difference, and to be a light unto the nation, set an example of holiness, which we don't always do, but we do try. How to tackle it? I am reminded of Martin Luther King, who said, "You don't drive out darkness with more darkness. You need light. So you don't drive out hate with more hate. You need love." There are 2 things that I think we could do. We stop it at the beginning. In education, we go into schools and we say, knowledge will stop the anti-Semitic attacks. You just need to be taught. We catch them before their ideas have solidified. The second thing, and as Yogesh said, I am chair of the Hearts Interfaith Forum, so my firm belief is one of the things that we must do is interfaith activity. Face-to-face action, side-by-side community action. This is what we should be doing. I agree with many things that have been said already, but I'd like to make a small voice of the Jewish problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Reynold. Thank you. Our next speaker is Imran Khan, representing the second biggest religion in the world, Islam. So bringing the Muslim Islamic point of view. Imran Khan, over to you, Imran.
Hi, thank you, Yogesh. Hello, everyone. No pressure there. Representation for the whole globe. Thank you for that. Hi, respected Mayor Peter Taylor, and I can see Councillor Rabbi Martins here as well. It's good to see you guys. So there's a lot of valid points that have been raised and discussed, and it's quite difficult not to be negative or to be mean about society when talking about the flaws of society. So I might have to be a bit mean for a little bit and then try to be nice afterwards. So this question, that is society becoming more intolerant, I think it's becoming more intolerant as well as more tolerant at the same time. And I think that's probably possible because of the polarization within society. And that polarization is increasing. So you have a group of people who are increasing tolerance, and there are a group of people who are increasing intolerance. And there seems to be an expansion of that in society. There are people who are more open-minded and they're ridding themselves of baggage. And then there are people who are full of hatred from the offset, and their bigotry, and that's spreading around amongst their own circles, or at the very least, enhancing their own hatred or bigotry. I think an example of this would be maybe the treatment of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. The response in this country is really wide varying. You'll find people very emotional about the marriage, and people triggered by some sort of feeling or emotion or an opinion, when really is that really required to have such a strong opinion about the marriage? Just two people getting married, and it happened to be of a different color. But this kind of racism that exists in society has kind of been drawn out by this marriage, particularly because it's a royal marriage, and the divide between class, royalty, the common man, has been exposed. The divide between races has been more exposed. But there are also people, those who are anti-racist and really supportive, and that's increased. So it's been an education exercise, I think, for society to learn about the differences of racism and bigotry that exist out there. Recently, as part of Hijaz community, I helped organize a summit on racism, actually. We had about 33 speeches attacking racism from every kind of angle, especially even racism within the Muslim society, because racism exists in every sort of society, and Muslims are made of every kind of color. So they're all around the world. So that sort of a challenge was there too. And people can mask their intolerance, or they can openly be intolerant and sort of speak their mind. So that's an example of, I think, how people are breaking down a bit in society, and also making better blocks in society. But we are a globalized world, and society is very connected. We have social media, we have mass media, and we're all connected to world affairs. We're connected to each other. We can understand what's happening in another country. We can understand what's happening. I think there's a phone call going off here. We can understand if there's an atrocity in one part of the world, it can quickly be filtered through without media necessarily, sanitizing that content. It can really get far, far and wide, which can not only educate people on what's happening in the world, but also can stem extreme reactions, emotional reactions within people of hatred, of intolerance, or even call to action to stop oppression. So I think it's an interesting time where you have an unprecedented level of coverage, unprecedented level of insight into different things in the world that maybe we were not used to before, where we lived in a more localized, village mentality rather than a global mentality. So I suppose what I want to say about, from an Islamic point of view, is that to overcome ignorance and intolerance, I think there might be two things I would pick out today on a bank holiday weekend, is that we should tolerate people's intolerance. I think that's important, because we can't really have tolerance if there isn't an element of intolerance. Opposites always have to exist for the other to manifest. So I think we need to tolerate people's intolerance. People can disagree about things and they may not react in the best way possible, but we should try to accommodate that intolerance so that in the hope that they will change. So that's one thing which I'll talk about a bit more, I think. But the other thing I was thinking about is education, so people can liberate their thinking and their sort of flawed way of thinking. One of the fundamental points of teaching the values of Islam is that we are taught to be patient, to have sabr is the Arabic word. And when people have patience, they can deal with difficult matters with fortitude. They can find strength in that patience. And they can take the time to understand how to confront the problems that exist. And hopefully through love, we can turn hate into love. I'll give you an example of, very quickly, because it's not meant to be a full lecture, the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he used to walk home every day, a particular route. And this elderly lady, who was from a different faith, who was a Muslim at the time, she used to throw her rubbish from the rooftop so it would land on the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, as he would walk home. And she would repeat this every day. And the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, never once rebuked her, told her off, reacted, got angry. So he just carried on. He used to just brush himself off and carry on. And one day there was she didn't throw any rubbish over the rooftop, which concerned the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. At that point, he thought, oh gosh, why hasn't she interacted with me today? So he felt the need to go and knock on her door, and he found that she was actually very ill in bed. So he looked after her. He brought her food and drink and nursed her to her good health. And that action was sufficient for her to remove her hatred and her intolerance towards Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and towards Islam. So that's one way of ridding ourselves, I think, of intolerance, is through good actions, really, and not necessarily doing tit for tat. I don't think that's the right way. I think we should create a new, wise way of reacting. And through this, we can educate people, change hearts and minds, and give people the chance to ask questions. And hopefully we have the right answers and the correct answers in order to change somebody's perspective and lead to that harmony in society. So I think that's all I really want to say at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Imran Khan. Thank you. Our next speaker is a unificationist, Jeff Beckman. He's obviously here, to talk about from the unificationist point of view. But before he actually starts, I would like to, I think looking at the Zoom meeting presence, I can see most of you will be aware, but I'm not sure actually our YouTube listeners may or may not be aware. So just for their benefit, he's also our curator for a peace garden in Watford, Castlebury Park. So if you are actually coming to Watford celebration tomorrow, please spend a few moments in our peace garden and enjoy the blooms and blossom and all the hard work people like Jeff and others do, and also have some moments of peace and quiet there as well. But with that aside, over to Jeff now.
Thank you, Yogesh. And thanks to everyone who's spoken so far. I can concur with virtually everything people have said, really. But what can I bring to the conversation? And I think there's a lot of points that have been brought out to reflect on. But I didn't think I'd find myself agreeing with Alex, but I did agree with Alex's point. I think we are becoming a more tolerant society. But also I would ask the question, I think as Tony Rindle touched on, what are we becoming tolerant of? I think we really have to ask that question. And I think faiths generally have something very important to bring to society, which is a discipline. And dare I mention the word morality, a moral discipline. So as people of faith, we understand the value of discipline in our life, and I think that's the challenge of society. I think also an interesting point is we're all probably in some way in our society a minority, if we're in a secular society, of some sort. And the challenge comes for any faith when it becomes the majority. Is it then tolerant of people that don't subscribe to it? You know, so and that can only be addressed with the point that's been touched on many times here, which is the point of love. Our faith should teach us how to become more loving people. And if we can become more loving, we don't have a judgmental attitude towards people, but rather we should have a parental attitude, an attitude that cares about others. So when we treat others, the elderly as our parents or our grandparents, we treat each other as brothers and sisters, and we treat younger people as if they were our own children. And I do see an element of that in society coming, but I think the thing that divides is in the political sphere, we have the extremes of both left and right, and they feed on each other. And there is an element in society today which wants to, as was said, kind of pigeonhole people and say, oh, if you don't agree with me here, you must be over there, and try and push people to the extremes. And I think we have to resist this this push to an extreme and really look at how we can be moderate in all things and really caring in all things. Also, Imran touched on the point I wanted to mention, which is emotion, the emotions, of hatred coming up in people. The way we change the world is not through new legislation, but it's through changing our hearts. And this is what faith tries to do. It tries to teach us how to become, as we've said, more loving people. It changes our hearts. And becoming a more loving person means our emotions change, our feelings change towards others. And that's really the power of love. And some of you, or most of you, may know in the Unification Church, we have a very unique way of promoting this, and that's through marriage. So Reverend Moon always spoke about marriage, and you should marry your enemy, not just love your enemy, but marry them. So within our church, there's a big tradition of enemy nations, people from enemy nations marrying each other. So we have many British and Japanese, or Western and Japanese couples. My wife is Austrian, my daughter-in-law is Japanese, and another daughter-in-law is Argentinian. So we're trying to build bonds of love between nations in this way. Just like to end maybe with a quote from Reverend Moon, from his autobiography, which is called A Peace-Loving Global Citizen. He's talking about environmental issues now, but it's the same point applies. As the environmental issues grow more serious, many environmental groups have sprung up. The best environmental movement, however, is the one that spreads love. People generally take care of things that belong to them or to people they love. They do not, however, take care of or love the natural environment that God created. God gave this environment to humanity. It is His will that we use the environment to obtain food, to have it in abundance, and to experience the joy of living in the beauty of creation. Nature is not something to be used once and then thrown away. Our descendants for many generations to come must be able to rely on it just as we have. So truly, that is what all of us as people of faith have to offer, not just my faith, but just also to mention, Reverend Moon started the Unification Church, as it's called. He said he never intended to start a church. The original name was the Holy Spirit Association for the Unification of World Christianity. And the idea was to bring all faiths together, and particularly Christianity, because there's an incredible power in the Christian message. But as we know, as an interfaith group, there's so many points that we concur on. There's so many points that we can unite on. And if we unite and act, we can move this great power of love to change the world, really, certainly to change the society around us in a very great way. So that's my offering. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeff Beckman, from bringing the unificationist point of view. And we have saved the best till the last. We have a top team of mother and daughter, Dr. Karishma Koka and Jeru, representing one of the oldest religion as well, Zoroastrian. And they will, I'm sure, enlighten us, actually bringing their point of view. In India, we refer to them as lovely Parsi people, but obviously original religion referred to as Zoroastrian. Over to Dr. Karishma Koka and Jeru.
Thank you very much, Yogesh Bhai, for your invitation from Judith today from the Watford group. It's been an honor to listen to so many wonderful, unifying speakers. I express my gratitude to Mr. Rohinton Ravetna, who has joined us from America, who works in interfaith and intrafaith. And most my deep gratitude to Mr. Jangir Sarosh, who introduced me to the Watford group. And my pranams or naman to all of you here today, senior in your good actions, senior in your good thoughts to me. I believe firmly in intergenerational work and thought sharing. So thank you for having me here today to share with you. I've got a short presentation, which I'll request Mr. Calvert to share when he's ready. I come from a mixed background. So my father is actually a non-practicing Hindu. My mother is Zoroastrian. I believe in all faiths and none. And I'm a scientist. So my background is in neuroscience. And my father gave me the guidance of conserving all that is good, including conserving ancient Zoroastrianism. So with reverence to all the elders who have come before us, to Asho Zarathustra, the prophet, Asho means righteous, pure, and reverence to all the leaders of all the good thoughts we have heard shared today from so many diverse viewpoints. I bring to you a set of values based on good thoughts, good words, and good deeds to build happiness and harmony. I'll request my mummy to sing a verse from Asho Zarathustra's Gathas, which says something very special about happiness, which actually we've heard from so many wonderful speakers today. Mummy?
Happiness be to one who spreads happiness, who brings happiness to others. Ushtamaya, Ushtamaya, Yamaya, Yamaya, Ushtakamaya, Chit, Ushtamaya, Yamaya.
Thank you, Mummy. As Mummy has taught me since my childhood, we can share what we have cultivated within ourselves. So this concept of progressing together as a collective with gratitude in a way that sustains through time. So what we today in today's modern world term as sustainable development is fundamental to Asho Zarathustra's Gathas. The term is called frashokereti. Fra meaning to go forward. And we work as a collective together. This concept of revering people on account of their righteous action in a fellowship, so that we seek to come together like the rivers coming together, where the emergent property is progress for all, is fundamental. But I see it as fundamental to not just Zoroastrianism, but fundamental to all that is good in the world, all the religions, all of science, everything. And this celebration is what we are celebrating today. So our coming together today in this beautiful fellowship or this fraternity is testimony to the fact that we are all seeking to build progress, to build a celebration of diversity, a celebration of all that is good. And in Zoroastrianism, the word for this is rafedral, to celebrate that which supports, so that we are now interdependent and we acknowledge this in the world. We share our responsibility. So this verse that my mummy sang for you, may happiness be to one through whom happiness reaches others. This happiness is a concept of harmonious happiness, of celebration, so that the light of wisdom, and in Zoroastrianism, this light that dispels darkness, as we've heard from other faiths today, the celebration of diversity and the building of wisdom through processing knowledge in the light of righteousness and order is important. So we say think, reflect, and decide so as to build knowledge that protects. At the very beginning of the Gathas, Asho Zarathustra's songs of revelation, he says to us, let us rejoice all action done with the good mind to please the soul of all creation. This concept of revering all that is good, progressing to sustain and to please all of creation builds a fellowship with each other as human beings and with everything in the universe, nature, our neighbors, our family, and like we heard from the previous speaker, people senior to us, people junior to us. And we revere energy. We revere energy light, the light of wisdom and knowledge, but also fire, or the energy of fire within each creation. So we have metabolic fire in us. We have light, whether it's in a candle. We have energy in everything. And we seek a path of via media with respect and reverence for all, just like all our speakers have talked about in one way or another today. And around the world, there are increasing conversations like what we are having today. So I firmly believe, in answer to the topic that we have been asked to address in 3 minutes today, that we are actually growing more, not just tolerant, but celebratory of each other, celebration of each other's good, and growing to seek strength for each other. And in that strength that we give each other, we get stronger ourselves. There is a prayer in the Zoroastrian Daina. Daina means faith. It also means our conscience, which says the gift of the good mind comes to those who take action to progress the world of Ahura Mazda, meaning supreme energy of wisdom. And we say that let good authority, what we call kshatriyam, come to those who share with those who need, to uplift the world, to build strength and happiness. And this happiness comes to those who follow the law of righteousness and order, good order, for the sake of righteousness.
With discipline.
With discipline and righteousness. And this itself is a reward. So we don't work for something else. Being strong enough to do what is right by others, by the nature that is around us that gives us this energy, that is what we celebrate. So once again, I'm open to questions. I'd like to share with you what's on the next slide, which is that in Harrow, we have the Zoroastrian Trust Funds for Europe, which is one of the oldest established religious voluntary organizations in the UK of South Asian descent.
We've completed 160
We've
years.
completed 160 years, and Zoroastrians are recognized as one of the 9 faith communities in the UK. And around the world, we are seeking to build, together with all of you, a fellowship of celebration of all good actions by young and the elderly together, because we also celebrate the young as the wisdom of the future, as we realize and acknowledge that we stand upon the shoulders of those who have gone before us around the world and the nature that has come before us ages ago, as Asho Zarathustra guided us thousands of years ago, that we revere all that is good and we celebrate this is the month of Fravardigan or Farvardin, where we give gratitude. We venerate the Fravashis, the good energy of the supreme energy in each of creation. So we give respect and gratitude for the good that has come before us, upon which we seek to build strength, harmony, and happiness for the good of all, in a way that sustains through time, for both nature, for all that has energy in the whole of the universe, and for all of humanity. So with that thought of growing stronger together, I thank you all for listening to me, and I look forward to your questions and corrections from those who are senior to me. Thank you very much, Mr. Calvert. Thank you, Yogesh Joshi, and thank you, Judith.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Karishma Koka and Mother Jeru. That completes all our speakers who are actually supposed to talk about our today's topic. And now actually we open up for anybody to make any additional comments or questions. Let me actually kick off with one of my own that may probably get the ball rolling. So this is actually something what Alexander actually talked about, actually, that in a way we are kind of developing a tolerant society, and legislation is actually helping us to actually bring about some of the changes. What question I have is actually, I mean, there is a lot of legislation, at least in terms of overcoming discrimination or some laws about XYZ or whatever. So legislation is there to help overcome some of the challenges. But how do we actually change the mindset of the people? Because obviously law is on one side, but then the authority is not there. And people actually, obviously, we continue saying on social media or through newspapers or other means, at least, every now and then the intolerant action or words or deeds continue to happen. So at the grassroots level, how do the faiths actually can work actually to bring about this change and make us more tolerant and more loving? Anybody would like to kick off? Actually, maybe let me start with Alexander, and I'll come to Dr. Kavika. Okay, as he mentioned that, so maybe let me start if he's okay with that.
Thank you very much. I mean, I ended by saying that my solution isn't really the law at all, which I was using as an example of some of the progress we've made towards a more liberal society. My solution is much more personal. I said that we need to get people talking together, communicating and listening to one another in the real world. And one of the dangers I highlighted was the digital space, which seems to be polarizing people and pushing people towards the extremes of politics and towards extremes of disagreement. I think that once people recognize the humanity of those that they consider others or different, that can often lead towards greater tolerance. I also just quickly wanted to pick up on something which I think is quite a dangerous point. I don't remember who said it, but somebody said that we should even tolerate people's intolerance. And for me, I think we absolutely must not. It's a philosophical point called the tolerance paradox. The one thing we should never tolerate is other people's intolerance, because that's what leads to a dangerous society. If we turn away from the intolerance of others rather than challenging it, then we create a society in which people are not only marginalized and isolated, but actually become at risk of attack, of danger, of hate speech. We must always stand up against intolerance where we see it and challenge it.
Thank you very much. Okay, I did see a couple of raised hands, at least from the speakers, but I see some actually hands from the non-speakers. I think I'll give them a chance first. So let me start with Peter Taylor. Actually, could you come in, please? Yeah, Peter.
Thanks very much, Yogesh, and thanks everyone. It's been a really interesting discussion. My question was, I think I mentioned at a previous Watford Interfaith Association event that Hope Not Hate did a study about hostility and division across the country. And they said that in areas where there's been rapid change, there's often more hostility if you have waves of immigration that can lead to difficulties, but that there was exceptions to this, and the exceptions were Watford, Milton Keynes and Chigwell. And it was great to be an exception for our unity. And I'd just be interested to know why people, I'm not expecting any experts on Chigwell or Milton Keynes on this call, but why people think Watford has a united town compared to other places. What do you think we're doing well?
Thank you. Chanda Shivam, you want to bring a different point of view or mention anything? I see your hand.
Okay, I just, not different points of view, it is just how I reflected throughout this discourse. What I've, the contributions from my learned friends, that I was sort of thinking, what is tolerance and how much of it do democracies require? And can tolerance be measured? And also at this, alongside, I was thinking, you know, people are getting more tolerant, you know, towards, tolerance is a multidimensional term these days, but what about the intolerance? And you know, in the current culture of like virtue signaling and virtue signaling and cancel culture,
that one dislikes,
you know, it is getting a bit
disagrees with.
It's raising lots of difficult questions. But at the end of the day, I had one of my learned friends say that tolerance itself is not enough. So I will just like to add a quote from an American politician and judge, Alcee Hastings. And he, you know, this is the quote. He said, not just Christians and Jews, but also Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus, and the followers of many other religions believe in values like peace, respect, tolerance, and dignity. These are values that bring people together and enable us to build responsible and solid communities. Thank you to everybody.
Okay, thank you, Chanda. Okay, Reynold, I see your hand up. Okay, if you want to come in, please.
Yes, thank you. A number of things occurred to me. You asked about basically intolerance across Hertfordshire. I think we live in a very peaceful and tolerant county. We do not across Hertfordshire have too many extremes of a divergence. There are more Jews in Hertsmere than there are anywhere else in Europe. And that might be a source of intolerance, but I can't see why. The other thing that occurred to me is going back to what do we do about it? And I would come back and repeat what I said. The thing that we need to do is to go back into schools and promote tolerance and promote diversity in schools before any of the intolerant ideas solidify in the head. And the other thing I said was that we do need to talk to each other, and the mechanism in my mind there is the interfaith groups. And the interfaith groups do a wonderful job, but they don't get to as many places of worship as they could do, as they should do. For instance, this is a great meeting. Are there any Roman Catholics here? Thank you, Peter. You represent half of the Christian community in the country, and there's just you here. I represent about 0.5% of the country, so I'm privileged to be here.
Thank you, Reynold. Okay, before we come to Jeff, who is the next person with the raised hand, actually, Peter Taylor message, actually, that thank you very much for joining, giving up your valuable time, but you have to leave shortly. So thank you for attending our discussion today. And as always, hopefully see you tomorrow as well. Okay, thank you, Peter. Come to Jeff and then Dr. Karishma Koka. Okay, Jeff.
Thank you. Yeah, I think this is a really important point. You know, I find it very difficult. How do we legislate against things? You know, we legislate things, but I'm concerned when we legislate something, it just drives it underground. You know, so people don't feel free to speak about it. They start speaking about things in private, and then you get like little groups build up. So my concern about like legislation is then people don't say what's on their mind, and then therefore you can't challenge it. You know, so I agree you have to challenge people. The challenge with challenging people is that you may provoke antagonism. I think, and this again is why I think faith communities have something to offer, because we can maybe teach the value of respecting and being kind to others, even if we don't agree with them. You know, how do we speak reasonably to people? You know, and just to kind of, I'd like to tell you a story. You know, just to reiterate my earlier point. I remember a conversation. I'll keep it as brief as possible. I had a conversation when I was a young man, a schoolboy, with my headmaster about racial prejudice, and he said to me, "Yeah, I'm not against black people; they're fine, you know, but I wouldn't want my daughter marrying one." And I looked at him and I thought, my goodness, you know, he was a person I respected, and I was quite shocked at his reply. And I was sharing this with somebody else recently, an older gentleman, older than me, and he said, "Yeah, I can understand that. I get on all right with my colleagues who are, you know, different race, but I wouldn't want my daughter coming home saying she was going to marry one, you know." So, but I'm sure if his daughter did, he would, if he was open enough, he would soon find this person would make a great son-in-law, you know. So, you know, and this also kind of reinforces the point that Reynold was making. When we have more relationship with each other, you know, when we get to know the people that look suspicious to us, you know, I don't like that person because he wears this kind of clothes or whatever. When we go out of our way to speak to them, then we can bring down the barriers and realize the things we have in common, which of course is what we do in Watford Interfaith, you know, and other interfaith groups.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, next will be Dr. Karishma Koka and then Francois. Okay, so
thank you so much, Yogesh Bhai, for this very, very pertinent question today about legislation. In order to answer this, I'm going to briefly touch upon 2 points. The Cyrus cylinder. So when King Cyrus expanded the Iranian Empire, he freed the people of Jewish faith from the prisons. And in the Cyrus cylinder, it was legislated that each person must be allowed or indeed supported to celebrate their own faith, their own way. The second thing I'd like to suggest is an idea that happens at the end of every prayer ceremony in the Zoroastrian faith, where the water from the prayer ceremony called the Hauma or Homa is poured back into a well so that it goes into the groundwater to enrich the earth from which anybody can draw. So these individual practices together with sharing love so that everyone feels secure, is actually a neurocognitive principle. When people feel not just respected, but loved, then we can build trust. We feel emotionally stronger. We can then build knowledge. We can then work to strengthen each other. You wanted to share a thought on guests.
We treat guests as our atithi. That means we treat them as we would treat God.
So in India, because we come from India, there is an ancient Indian faith, which is therefore from the Sanatan Dharma, what we now call Hinduism, which says Vasudeva Kutumbakam, the world is my family, and Atiti Devo Bhava, the guest is my God. That supreme energy. So I feel legislation is important. Teaching children from a very young age is critical, and also building people's emotional security so that when we feel safe and we know we are safe, not just in speech, but we know it, we feel it, it builds something very, very special.
Thank you, Dr. Kavita Khoka. Okay, next is Francois Murphy, our treasurer of Watford Interfaith Association and a very hardworking member of the committee, if I may say so. Francois.
Thank you. Thank you, Yogesh, and thank you for everybody who spoke this afternoon. I must say, I see how much in common we have, and it's so wonderful to listen to all of you. My concern is about the word tolerance, because we cannot tolerate everything. I think it's right, it's correct that we need to love each other and see that every human being is a child of God and have goodness and is good. But there's some attitude and behavior that we cannot accept. And we have to be careful about that, not to be tolerant of everything. Like, or you can love someone who is commit, crime and do evil thing against people, but you cannot accept this kind of attitude. You can love the person, but you cannot accept that behavior of hurting other people. So we have to be very careful with the term tolerance and recognize the difference between what is right and what is not right. And so like in our faith, we have, in all our faith, we have very clear definition of what is good and what is not good. Like we have the 10 Commandments who tell us very clearly, what is the right way to live. So I think it's important that we go to that, fundamental understanding. Like there are physical law in science that govern the world, there are also spiritual law that govern the or inner world or spiritual world. And if we don't respect those spiritual law, then we'll hurt ourselves. Like regarding morality, regarding the way we treat each other. So I just want to put that point because I'm concerned that in our society, we become tolerant of everything, the good and the bad. So we have to be very careful about that. Otherwise we'll hurt ourselves and we'll destroy ourselves if we go too much in that direction. So I just want to make that point. Thank you.
Very much. Thank you very much, Francois. Okay, next I see a raised hand from Mr. Jahangir Sharosh, our ex-chairman of Watford Interfaith Association, and also now working at the world level as the director of World Religion for Peace. So over to Mr. Sharosh.
Thank you, Yogesh Bhai. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, loud and clear.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for organizing this meeting. I would like to mention in relation to what can faith communities do. I think the first and the most important thing the faith communities need to do is to realize that the religion has to evolve. Like everything else, if we don't evolve, we die. We've got to survive. and I'm speaking of religion rather than religious institutions, because the religious institutions have been the problems. And therefore, what the faith communities can do is look within their own faith community as to what is their aspect of tolerance within the community, as to how they are treating their own women, the young people, what are they training them? And I think just now somebody touched on the point, tradition. If we continue with traditions that are 2,000, 3,000 years old, 1,500 years old, whatever, those traditions were appropriate at that time, and they are not appropriate today. As someone also said, I am in favor of Black people, but I won't want them to marry one of my daughters. Now that also applies to somebody from different religions suggesting that I will not marry, I'm not allowed to marry outside the faith. It is intermarriages, interfaith marriages are still being looked down upon. These are some of the elements that the faith communities have to decide within themselves.
It's 16:30.
Sorry, that's my computer. And the one thing the faith communities promote and yet don't follow is that we are all children of God in one element, or we are all one. We recognize we are all human beings, but we have no unity within the humanity. And here we have got a lot to learn from the humanists, but the humanists have a lot to learn from us as well, as to what exactly does it mean when we say we are all one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sarosh. Okay, next is Maria Butcher. I see your hand, so over to you, Maria.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful gathering this is. I've enjoyed every moment and everyone's point of view. I'd just like to tell a little story, really, which is profound and is continuing. A number of people came together, and you'll know about this in Watford, but maybe not everybody will know about it. And it was to do with supporting St. Vincent after the volcanic explosion. And it was churches coming together, but not just churches, people from all different religions and none. And one of the most interesting things that came out of this was that the people from those religions were saying, we're doing a lot for our own communities. We need to look towards the general community. And so this team that was the disaster response team has become a community action team formed to actually do something in the community. And I just want to put the point that we need to become more relevant in the general community. We have tremendous knowledge base and we have wonderful ways, but we need to share them wider in a loving way. And I just feel I would love to have, a little bit of discussion about that, what people feel. Because to me, it was absolutely common sense, and not just common sense, but a wonderful way to link our faiths and our lives with people in the community. I'd love to hear what people have to hear. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. Thank you. I see we have gone over our set time of 4:30. So, and I don't see any more raised hands as well. So a lot of people talked about love in a different point of view. Actually, all the faith and religion sort of speakers today at least talk about that. At least. So it seems, I feel appropriate at least that I actually end our session with a prayer of love. If I may, I'll just actually read these words to end today's meeting, and then we'll say thank you. So, prayer of love. My soul, listen unto me. Love thy Lord as the lotus loves water. Buffeted by waves, its affection does not falter. Creatures that have their being in water, taken out of water, die. My soul, if you have no such love, how will you obtain release? If the word of the wise is within us, we shall accumulate a store of devotion. My soul, listen unto me. Love your Lord as a fish loves water. The more the water, the greater the joy, greater the tranquility of his body and mind. Without water, it cannot live one watch of the day. Only God knows the anguish of its heart. My soul, listen unto me. Love your Lord as water loves milk. It takes on to beat, boils, and evaporates. Before the milk can suffer, he alone unites, he alone separates, he alone bestows true greatness. Without the wise, love cannot be born. The dross of the ego cannot be rinsed away. He who recognizes God within understands the secret of the word, and it's happy. Also, there is but one gate to the Lord's mansion, and there is no other sanctuary. A prayer for love. Thank you very much for all our 10 speakers taking part, enlightening us with your wisdom. And thank you very much who joined us for today's gathering of Sacred Space. And with that, we conclude our meeting, Sacred Space. Tomorrow at 1:30, we all come to Bandstand in Kesselbury Park and have the main event of Watford celebration. Thank you very much. Thank you and bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you. And thank you, Father Jeff, for managing the meeting. And
yes.
Thank you, Father Jeff. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Let's put love into practice.
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. You can close the meeting now, Father Jeff.
Thank you, Judith. Thank you, Yogesh. And thank you, Mr. Calvert. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.